Next up, we're going to hear from Susan Muskett. Susan is the president of profamilywoman.org. She's an attorney who spent much of her career working to enact pro-life laws in the US Congress, including she served as senior legislative counsel for the National Right to Life Committee. She's a graduate of Georgetown University. She received her law degree from the University of Notre Dame Law School. And she'll be speaking to us tonight on the impact of the Equality Act on public schools and parental rights. Over to you, Susan.
Thank you, Ryan. In my opinion, one of the most serious impacts of the Equality Act is going to be its impact on children. And I'm going to focus on its impact on children in our public schools. Now, keep in mind, as I discuss this, that if this bill passes, this will be a national law affecting every public school in America, including elementary schools down to kindergarten age. So let's begin with the school bathrooms. The Equality Act will require federally funded public schools, which is all public schools, to allow students access to restrooms, locker rooms, group showers, and sports based on the student's asserted gender identity. And this will apply nationwide. And a school cannot prevent a transgender student from accessing these facilities so long as he or she asserts a gender identity that is compatible with the sex of that segregated area. This is what will be required of every public school if the Equality Act becomes law. This change in school policy would compromise the privacy of students and could create discord in the school community. Now, transgender students will likely be the sole arbiters of their transgender status because the Equality Act provides no guidance for schools. So it will likely be the student's unilateral assertion of their gender identity that will be the controlling criteria, and that will set in motion all of these requirements regarding the proper treatment of transgender students. The Equality Act will also likely impact the teachers in our public schools. The Act's prohibition on discrimination based on gender identity will likely mean that public school teachers will be required to address transgender students by their new name and chosen pronouns, even if it violates a teacher's religious beliefs. If a teacher doesn't do so, it will likely be grounds for disciplinary action. That means that Christian public school teachers could be fired for refusing to lie about a child's sex. This has already happened in Virginia. A high school teacher was fired because he could not in good conscience use male pronouns to refer to a biological girl who identified as a male. The teacher did address the student with the student's chosen new masculine name. But according to the teacher's attorney, the teacher was given an ultimatum: either affirmatively use male pronouns when referring to the student or be fired. Next, although it is not explicit in the Equality Act, there is an underlying presumption in the Act that the only way to address a child's gender dysphoria is to affirm the child's new gender identity. And this means that parents could be placed at risk of being reported by school personnel to a child protection agency if they are not affirming. If those parents are not affirming of their child's new gender identity, it could be construed by school personnel that the parents are not acting in the best interest of the child. And lastly, if the implementation of the Equality Act follows the path of the implementation of the Civil Rights Act, then the public school curriculum itself could promote gender identity ideology with little opportunity for parental opt-out. 10 states currently have laws prohibiting sexual orientation and gender identity in school curriculum. But if the Equality Act becomes law, those state laws could be overridden. So the bottom line is that the Judeo-Christian belief that God created us as male and female will be undermined throughout the entire public school system. Just think of those innocent children being bombarded at their school with gender theory. Many more children may become confused about their own gender identity. I've been talking about public schools, but no doubt, if it becomes law, activists will use the Equality Act to go after federally funded private schools, whose lawyers will be kept very busy in court trying to protect the school's rights. Now, I want to address parental rights. I've already touched on how parental rights will be placed at risk in the public schools. But of equally serious concern is the impact the Equality Act could have on the rights of parents to control certain medical treatments for their children. For children experiencing gender dysphoria, there are mental health counselors who work with children to help them become comfortable with their biological sex. But if the Equality Act passes, parents may not be able to find a mental health counselor who could help a child accept their biological sex. It is likely that the Act's prohibition on discrimination in healthcare based on gender identity will result in mental health counselors being required to affirm a child's transition to a new gender identity. And so the only mental health counselors that a parent might be able to find will likely be those that will affirm a child's transition to a new gender identity. Now that's with regard to mental health. Regarding the actual physical treatment of a child who is experiencing gender dysphoria, there's an underlying assumption in the Act's non-discrimination in healthcare provision that puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgery transition are standard treatment. And if it is viewed as the standard medical treatment, if a parent declines these treatments, their child could potentially be taken away from them by the state. That has already happened in a case in Ohio, which Gregory Baylor is going to address next. And so it can be expected that the Equality Act will pit parents against children. And what's especially sad is that we are talking about potentially pitting parents against minor children who likely don't even comprehend the life-altering consequences of taking puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones. I think of that British girl, Kira Bell, who was given puberty blockers at 16, testosterone at 17, and a double mastectomy at 20 in her transition to a new identity as a male. She came to regret her transition, later telling a court, "I started to just see a woman with a beard, which is what I am." Thank you, and we have more resources regarding this aspect on our website, profamilywomen.org.